Dr. Night Echoes. Good evening, everyone. Draw in close. Tonight I bring you unsettling, creepy encounters whispered from deeper places. When I was 14, I took a shortcut home through the cornfield behind our neighborhood. It was almost dark, but I'd walked that route 100 times. Halfway through, I noticed someone standing between the rows, far off, barely visible. I assumed it was one of the local farmers until I realized he wasn't moving. Every few steps I took, he seemed angled a little differently, as if he were turning to follow me, though I never saw him actually move. I stopped once to be sure he was real, and I heard something shift in the stalks. One slow step, not toward me, but toward the road directly in front of me. I ran. The rows blurred around me, and I didn't look back until I reached the fence on the other side. When I did, the figure was standing at the edge of the corn, facing me, too close. His clothes didn't look like farm clothes. They looked like old, threadbare hospital scrubs. I jumped the fence and sprinted home. I told my dad, and he walked me back with a flashlight. The field was empty, but on the ground near where the figure stood, the dirt was disturbed in a long drag mark, like someone had been pulling their feet. The next morning, the drag mark was gone. But at the edge of the corn, right where I had seen him first, someone had left a pair of hospital ID bracelets tangled together in the dirt. My sister asked me to watch her infant daughter for a few nights. She gave me the baby monitor and joked that it might pick up weird interference. The first night, I heard faint static around midnight, then a low murmuring sound. Not words, just a voice speaking too close to the microphone. I checked the nursery immediately. My niece was asleep. The room was empty. The next night, the murmuring came back. This time, slower, dragged out breaths between each sound. I unplugged the monitor and plugged it back in. The murmuring returned instantly, louder, like whoever was making the sound realized I was listening. The third night, I didn't sleep. The monitor stayed quiet until around 2. Then I heard a whisper I could barely understand. It wasn't a word I recognized, but the tone was wrong, too practiced, like someone rehearsing speech. I opened the nursery door slowly. My niece slept peacefully, but the baby monitor camera, which should have been pointed at the crib, was tilted upward to the ceiling vent, and the whispering kept coming through the speaker, even though the vent was silent. The next morning I told my sister. She said she'd been hearing things too, but only when she was home alone. She didn't want to talk about it. Before I left, I glanced at the monitor one last time. The camera was pointed at the crib again, but in the corner of the screen, near the ceiling, there was a shape I couldn't identify. Not a face, not a figure, just something that hadn't been there before. My apartment has a long hallway that always felt colder than the rest of the place. I started hearing breathing there at night. Slow, steady, not like anyone I knew. I convinced myself it was the air ducts until the breathing paused whenever I walked past, like it was holding its breath with me. One night, I stayed up, determined to figure it out. Around 2 in the morning, the breathing started again. I stood in the hallway and listened. It was coming from the far end, near the utility closet. I opened the door. Nothing inside. But when I closed it, the breathing moved, right behind me, close enough that I felt the air shift. I turned on every light and didn't sleep. The next morning, I found something on the floor at the end of the hallway, a small pile of dust shaped like someone had been standing there for a long time. The breathing still happens every night, sometimes closer, sometimes right outside my bedroom. I didn't understand why my dog kept waking me at 3 every morning. He never growled inside the house, and he never stared at the back door like that. The first few nights, I thought maybe a stray cat was wandering through the yard, but the growling got worse, and one night I heard something new. 3 slow knocks on the glass, more like someone trying to see if I was awake. I started waiting for it. I turned off the lights, sat on the floor beside the door, and held my dog close so he wouldn't bark. He kept whining under his breath. When the knocking finally came again, he pressed his body against me, shaking. I expected to see someone moving or shifting around outside, but when I looked through the glass, something stood completely still on the patio. I couldn't make out details, just a tall shape facing the door like it had been standing there for hours. Its posture wasn't natural, too straight, like it didn't know how a person should stand. I reached for the porch light switch. I didn't even flip it all the way before the shape disappeared. Not stepped away, not ran. It was just gone, as if the air swallowed it. The next morning, I checked the security cameras. Nothing moved on video. The only thing captured was audio. 3 knocks, then a long, shaky inhale, so close it rattled the microphone. My dog refuses to go near the door now. Last night, at 3 on the dot, I heard the knocking again. But this time, there were 4 taps, spaced the same way, soft and patient, like it realized I was listening. And tonight, I swear the glass bowed inward, like something on the other side pressed its face against it harder than before. I only went to the basement because I thought the water heater was leaking. My landlord always said it wasn't safe down there, but he never explained what that meant. I assumed he was talking about the wiring or the uneven steps. When the dripping sound started late one night, I grabbed a flashlight and went down anyway. The basement was bigger than I expected, completely empty except for a single wooden chair placed dead center in the room. It faced the stairs, angled as if it had been waiting for someone to come down. The sight of it made my stomach pull tight. The room had no shelves, no boxes, not even dust on the concrete. Just the chair and faint scuff marks around it, like it had been dragged in circles. The heater was fine, no leak, no pressure problem. Before going back upstairs, I turned around to look at the chair again. It wasn't in the exact same position. It had shifted a few inches toward me, the legs leaving fresh marks on the floor. I rushed upstairs, closed the door, and tried convincing myself I imagined it. But 2 days later, while I was making dinner, I heard scraping downstairs. A long, slow drag, then another. The sound stopped right under where I was standing. I called the landlord the next morning and asked what he meant about the basement being unsafe. He paused for a long time, then told me he'd leave a lock for the basement door. He didn't explain anything else. Last night, I woke up to another sound. Not scraping, creaking, like someone shifting in a chair, trying to get comfortable. Today, when I walked past the basement door, I noticed something new. The doorknob wasn't just loose. It was turned slightly, as if someone on the other side had twisted it and stopped the moment I paused outside the door. And to stop at that motel. I was exhausted from driving and just needed a few hours of sleep. The room wasn't great, but it was clean enough, and I thought that was all I needed. I fell asleep fast. Sometime around 2 in the morning, a knocking sound snapped me awake. It came from the window, not the door. The curtains were thin. When I turned toward the noise, I saw the outline of a head leaning close, unmoving, as if the person had pressed their forehead against the glass. They didn't speak. They didn't try the door. They just knocked once every minute, slow, patient, like they knew I was awake and were waiting for something. I reached for my phone and called the front desk. The guy working sounded tired but concerned. He told me no one else was checked in and there was no security or maintenance staff outside at night. He said he'd come check. The knocking stopped the moment I hung up. When the clerk knocked on my door, I opened it immediately. He walked around the side of the building with me. The window was empty. Nothing around, no footprints. He shrugged and said maybe someone passing by thought it was another room. But the next morning, when sunlight hit the glass, I saw the prints. 2 large handprints smeared against the window. One set was facing outward, like someone had pressed their palms from inside the room. The other faced inward. The outward ones didn't match my hands. The spacing was too wide. The fingers were too long. I checked out immediately. As I drove away, I realized something else that made my chest tighten. The inward-facing handprints were still visible when we checked the night before, but the outward-facing ones weren't. They showed up sometime after I fell asleep again. Myself. Nothing looked strange except the crawlspace panel. The screws were halfway out like someone had been working on it. I tightened them and went back down, trying not to dwell on it. That night, the tapping got louder. I stood directly under it and watched dust fall in a thin line onto the floor. When I got a chair and pressed my hand to the panel, it shifted under my fingers. The screws I had tightened were loose again. My brother swore the house didn't make noises like that. While he was talking, something scraped against the wood above me, light but deliberate. I pressed my hand to the panel again. Something pushed back. Not hard, just one soft nudge, like it wanted to check if I was still there. In the morning, the panel was open. The screws were on the floor. Inside the crawl space, the insulation was carved into a narrow path that went deeper than my flashlight could reach. I called the police, but before anyone arrived, something moved inside the crawl space again. Slow, coming toward the opening. The first time I heard the voice, I thought I was dreaming. It sounded exactly like my girlfriend calling my name from the kitchen, but she wasn't staying over that night. The second time, it repeated a phrase she uses whenever she needs help with something. Same tone, same rhythm, too accurate to brush off. I stayed in bed and listened. Something settled into the couch, like someone lowering themselves slowly, trying not to be noticed. I checked the apartment the next morning. Everything was locked. The voice kept coming back every few nights, perfectly matching real things my girlfriend had said earlier that week, like it had been listening to us. One night, around 3 in the morning, I heard her voice right outside my bedroom door, whisper, "Please open it." I froze. The whisper came again, almost at the floor. "Why aren't you answering me?" At sunrise, the apartment was silent, but one couch cushion was indented, like someone had been sitting there all night, leaning forward, waiting. I do rideshare late at night. One passenger stands out. He got in without saying anything. No destination typed in. He just said, "Drive straight." So I did. The longer we drove, the more wrong it felt. He kept staring at the window, not blinking. Every few minutes, he would tilt his head slightly, as if listening to something outside. We ended up on a rural road, no streetlights, no houses. He finally said, "Stop here," but there was nothing there. No driveway, no intersection, just trees. When he opened the door, he paused and looked at me for the first time. His expression didn't match his voice when he said, "Don't wait for me." Like he wasn't the one choosing the words. He disappeared into the trees without a flashlight. I waited 5 seconds, then drove off. A mile down the road, the app glitched. His ride still showed as in progress. I tried ending it manually. It wouldn't close. When I got home, the app still said he was in my car. The next night, I checked my dashcam footage. It showed the empty back seat the entire drive. The moment I walked into my apartment that night, I knew something was wrong. Nothing dramatic, just a shift I felt before I saw it. The smell was different. Not bad, just not mine. The lights looked dimmer, even though I knew they were at full brightness. I checked the living room first. Everything was where it should be, but angled wrong. The couch was turned a little. The coffee table was 2 inches closer to the wall. The picture frames were all slightly rotated, so the faces inside weren't looking outward anymore. It felt like someone had tried to recreate my living room from memory and missed small details. I checked the whole apartment. No signs of forced entry. Nothing stolen, nothing out of place, except the strange adjustments. Before going to bed, I fixed one frame. I put it exactly how I liked it, making sure it was level. I even took a picture so I could compare later, just in case I was imagining everything. When I woke up, the frame was turned completely to face the wall. Nothing else moved, just that. Over the next few days, little things kept changing. A lamp tilted. A book shifted on the shelf. The bathroom mat rotated slightly. Never enough to seem threatening on its own, but always precise, always deliberate. I started locking the bedroom door at night. One morning, the lock was still engaged, but the item I'd placed in front of the door, a heavy bag, had been nudged aside. Last night, something new happened. I woke up to the soft sound of breathing. Not close, but steady, familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. It sounded like someone matching my own breaths, as if listening through a thin wall. This morning, the apartment was rearranged again. Not major things, just enough to let me know it wasn't done. And now my bedroom door, which I know I shut, is open just a few inches, enough for someone to watch.